Welcome to Root U. Today, Dr. Ram is on hiatus, so you're stuck with me. But this is a subject that I can talk for about, I don't know, 72 hours on straight. If we had to filibuster on this subject, this is what I would talk about. And so it's really important to go over the medical disclaimer in this aspect because, one, this conversation and really all the information pertaining to this is for educational and entertainment purposes. We're not going to talk about any medical advice because, well, the medical establishment doesn't know as much as we do. And you shouldn't use this in diagnosing any health or fitness problems or diseases, because what we're going to talk about is the foundation for all of them, and all they're going to give you is a diagnosis based on a bunch of symptoms. So if you have a healthcare professional, you should refer to them for two reasons. One, they have your history, and two, you should tell them what you've learned so you can help them help others. And you should always consult with your healthcare professionals if you got them for the same purposes that I just outlined. But we don't claim to cure or treat any diseases or illnesses. And this information isn't to be intended to be used for any sales or marketing purposes. It's seriously made available for your education and your entertainment, which is why it's Root U. So let's rock. My favorite subject is not with us today, but Dr. Ram, being the formulator of everything that we're going to talk about, especially the second part. Really what's important in a world where we're being attacked by different mechanisms of nanotechnology and bioscience engineering, from mold and fungus to heavy metal exposure, which is our topic of discussion today. If you're going to make decisions about your health and you're going to look at getting solutions to use in the current environment, you best have someone who understands every aspect of what's going on, that has a background in nanotechnology and bioscience engineering. Dr. Ram just so happens to be the only one available, because all of the people that they don't have comparable backgrounds, but have backgrounds similar to the work that she's done, all work in biotech, the military, or research. None of them have the ability to create, and none of them have come out of that industry for a couple of reasons. One, they don't want to leave, and two, they're paid so much money, they never will. So we got that. Me, why is this important? Because with me today at my side is the one you see here, the Tilly dog. She's napping next to me. But what's important in this conversation, I've got about 42, 43 years around integrative health and wellness. I hate the term wellness because we no longer practice that. But in the human and animal space, my last 17, 18 years has been focused on environmental toxicology and the application of how heavy metals and environmental toxins affect our system and the entire operating system that we are from head to toes. And then how to remediate it. And what I had put on me 17 years ago, was the first iteration of this amazing little clinoptilolite crystal and what it's capable of doing. So what we're going to look at is how we integrate the root-averse into ameliorating the effects of heavy metals and environmental toxins. And I just love the term ameliorating. So if we just take a moment, and if you think of this multi-syllabic word, because I have to give Jayla credit for this. It's one of those words that you get in the English language that you can appreciate greatly, because you never get to use it other than this. So what we're going to look at is the impact of heavy metals and environmental toxins on the body. And what's important to understand is I'm going to put a focus on one primarily, but when we talk heavy metals, what we're getting into are substances like mercury, cadmium, arsenic, lead, aluminum, cesium, strontium, gadolinium, graphene. You can throw the radioactive isotopes, because I was reading a great article from Harvard earlier today on depleted uranium, which is something that I've put a great amount of focus in. You can look at the other radioactive isotopes from nuclear meltdowns that have plagued Chernobyl, that have plagued the United States in many different aspects. You can also look to Japan because of what happened in Fukushima. And if you go through the United States, if you're in Oak Ridge in East Tennessee, which is actually not too far from where we are,
If you're in Hanford, in the state of Washington, which again was not too far, from where I went to university at Washington State University in Eastern Washington, but it was about 6 hours from where I grew up in Western Washington. When we look at heavy metals and environmental toxins, the impact of these is the cause of what plagues us in every aspect. And we're going to hit on some of these today and why this is important and why the removal of them is of not the utmost importance, but honestly, if it comes to you creating health or getting your health back, as I think it was Shakespeare that said, is the focus. It is the only thing you need to focus on initially if you want to regain your health. Everything that comes after that is ancillary to that foundational premise. So some of the key things that we look at when we look at heavy metals, and what you have to understand is mercury alone. Mercury is the worst neurotoxin known to man. It is the second most deadly chemical known to man, aside from radioactive isotopes that will nuke you, right? So plutonium, uranium, and such, if you're exposed to those, they're just bad. But if you look at, who do we need to mute? This always frustrates me. Someone's getting muted. There we go. I apologize. We'll mute that out later on. Don't like to be interrupted. So when we look at mercury, mercury is the worst neurotoxin. Second most deadly chemical. Number one is dioxin, right? If you're exposed to dioxin, you're going to die. The beautiful part with mercury is, depending upon how much you're exposed to, it's not going to kill you. It'll just destroy everything about you. And this is not new. The World Health Organization, before it was taken over, published the data in 1974 that at the time they knew about 85 to 90% of all chronic degenerative diseases were caused by environmental toxins and heavy metals. We've gone on to learn that it's probably more than that now. And even the things that we think are genetic actually have their links going back to environmental exposure. And we're probably going to dive into a few of those things. But when we look at going the top down, heavy metals are known to cause headaches and increase in strokes and brain ischemia, cognitive disorders, and neurodegenerative illnesses. But one of the things that's not talked about enough and is so prevalent today in today's world is the fact that it's these same heavy metals, primarily mercury, lead, and aluminum, these are the three primary neurotoxic heavy metals, right? So what does that mean? It means when you're exposed to them, they're going to find their way into your neurological system or into your brain, where they create chaos and havoc, right? And one of the things that's not talked about, because I don't think I've seen anyone else write about it, and this is my primary focus for finishing out the year, is mental health and psychological components of heavy metals, and also the spiritual component of heavy metals and their impact. Because what you have to understand with mercury, lead, and aluminum, these heavy metals, they are heavy is their operative word. So you have other heavy metals that are lighter: magnesium, sodium, potassium, that are essential metals, trace minerals, some macro minerals, but the trace minerals, they're also metals if you look at the periodic table of elements. But they're much lighter in their charge and they're less dense. So their molecular weight is lighter. If you were to think of them as a size, you'd think of like sodium, potassium, magnesium, like different size beach balls, right? So they have size, but you can bounce them around, they're lighter. To whereas the heavy metals like mercury, lead, aluminum are more like marbles, right? They're much smaller, they're much more dense, and even with them being smaller, they're heavier than the lighter metals, which means
based on their molecular charge, which a sodium, a magnesium, a potassium are usually a +1, the heavier metals are +2s and +3s. So they have the ability to block binding sites or displace those essential metals, which is where a lot of these disruptions come in. But as they get into your brain, they get into your tissue, they get into your organs, and your body's trying to deal with them, it doesn't have the mechanisms to get these out, right? And actually, mercury shuts off glutathione production, which is a conversation that we'll have shortly, I bet. I haven't looked at these slides other than a little bit, so I'm cheating. But we'll look at glutathione production and why glutathione is important. But you have to understand that if your body has a lot of mercury in it, and we all do for multiple factors, but if we're loaded with mercury, mercury actually shuts off the natural ability of the body, even when providing the proper amino acids needed for glutathione production. It shuts off the body's ability to create glutathione, because it's glutathione is one of the things that can remove mercury. And mercury is so evil that it knows what to disrupt in the body to protect itself and create more chaos. So when it gets into your brain, when it gets into your central nervous system, they'll block those binding sites. But if you look at the neurodegenerative issues like Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, ALS, MS, they're caused by tau, right? TAU. And this tau buildup is what CTE comes from, so chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And if you follow sports, you've probably heard of chronic traumatic encephalopathy, right? Because if you watch the American game of football, you've heard these conversations about concussions. But what 90+% of people don't understand and haven't recognized is that there are two forms of CTE. There's chronic traumatic encephalopathy, and then there is the version that chronic traumatic encephalopathy is actually derived from and is actually the true definition of the rest of the neurodegenerative diseases, which is chronic toxic encephalopathy. Goes back to the toxins, because these heavy metals will get into your brain, and when they conglomerate, when they amalgamate, when they come together, they create this tau, this amyloid plaque that causes all the disruptions in our brain. But because of them being +3 charged, they're densely positively charged. They will get to a binding site, but they still have their positive charge. And what do positive charged things like to hold on to? Well, they like to hold on to negatives. This is where the complications of our mental health issues come in hand, because whether it's something that is passed on from your mom, right, which is where our primary exposure to heavy metals takes place, what's in mom goes into us while we're in the womb. So these metals are being pushed from mom into the fetus, because that's the primary way to detoxify a woman, is to get her pregnant, because she basically has an outside receptacle that is growing inside her that her body can push everything into. You're not just getting the metals, you're getting the energy, the frequencies, the trauma, the stress of your mother that is being put into you as well. So you might hear people talk about past life issues. They have past life issues or familial issues because they're being transferred through the transference of the heavy metals, right? This is why we know that heavy metal toxicity is transgenerational. They're passed on. The issues that go along with them, the trailings, you can say, go along with them. So no matter what you try to do to improve your mental health, if you're not removing the mercury, the lead, the aluminum, the heavy metals that are in your brain and central nervous system that are holding on to all that trauma, holding on to the stress, you're never going to get better. But if you do, you see these things go away, because if there's no cause, you can have no effect. We can look at your lungs, we can look at your heart, we can look at your blood, we can look at your reproductive organs, we look at your vascular system, we can look at your digestive system and your gut. All of these areas are affected by these little guys. They destroy us. some of the simple symptoms that you might be diagnosed as, or that you can very easily identify: chronic fatigue, and now these things are identified as a disorder. And why are they identified as a disorder? Because they have no classification of them, but people have become so toxic that they've just given a bunch of symptoms and classified them as different issues so they can try to treat you for something when the underlying problem is so simple. You have autoimmune disorders and diseases, including those from Lyme and other factors. You have poor exercise performance, poor cardiovascular function, poor muscular function, poor recovery from lactic acid buildup because of toxicity, skin irritation. And when we look at skin, if you're here, we do things a little bit differently here, right? So amazing skin is not something that is done from the outside. Amazing skin starts on the inside, because most of your skin irritation issues, whether it be acne, psoriasis, eczema, actually are derived in your liver, because a toxic liver that can't clean itself out leads to a fatty liver, which your liver ends up trying to create space to store more toxins in because it can't get rid of it. The Mayo Clinic a couple years ago published their preliminary data stating that a minimum of 30% of all Americans, regardless of age, have a non-alcoholic fatty liver. If you're a member of the International Science Nutrition Society, you'll understand that we've reversed that. But skin issues start in your liver. Toxic liver expresses through your skin, and you have skin irritation issues. If you can clean up your liver and the rest of the operating system, your skin starts to glow on the outside. And then when you add in some of the good things that your body needs to start creating more collagen and recovering, you start to look outstanding and you get to create greatness. So we'll go there. You get to see brain fog, trouble concentrating, difficulty learning, and poor memory. This can be expressed in our kids, right? This can be diagnosed as being in the spectrum, like I was, right? They thought I was a little bit high needs and special needs as a kid. My wife would still argue that I'm very special needs, not just my diet. But we have the difficulty in maintaining our focus, maintaining our memory, whether it's short-term or long-term, and the brain fog and everything that comes along with it, right? These are all correlated to a little systemic toxicity. As we hit on the mental and psychological aspects, depression, manic depression, anxiety, bipolar, all of these different components are all traced back to metals. And it's funny how history actually has given us a narrative to understand what's actually happened. And we joke about how the media has to show us stuff, but even throughout history, they've done a great job of doing that. And if you remember the cartoon or the story of Alice in Wonderland, it's really important because there's one character that actually provides the narrative of understanding what Mercury does, and that's the Mad Hatter, right? Because in the book or in the movie, you get to see that the Mad Hatter is absolutely crazy, right? And the reason for that is back in, I think it was the 1500s, when they were making felt hats, and it's not the cobbler. Cobblers did feet. I forgot the name of the title for guys that make hats. But when they were making felt hats, they would cure the hats in mercury. And because of the vapor and everything that they were exposed to, they went nuts. The same that dentists do in today's world because of their use of amalgam fillings. And dentists, at least in the United States and globally, have the highest rates of suicide in any profession. They have the highest rates of mental issues because, well, they're poisoning themselves. They were trained to play with amalgam fillings, as they say, which are 52% mercury, that they're constantly exposed to, and they're putting them in people's mouths and drilling and exposing themselves to more mercury vapor on a daily basis, which is a problem.
So you see that. You see dementia, you see insomnia, you see digestive issues, irritable bowel syndrome. You can even throw the newest issue of Crohn's and different digestive issues. If we add in the little chemical called glyphosate on top of the heavy metals, then you get to see the rest of the issues when it comes to the, how do I put it? The destroying of our microbiome in our gut, right? It's the toxins that are in our food supply that are causing the problems, that are causing a leaky gut, that cause the allergies, right? You don't have an allergy to wheat or to gluten. You have a chemical response to a poison that is sprayed on the wheat, glyphosate, which is used as a desiccant, right? So it's not even this, so they use it on crops, they're using it as a desiccant. What does that mean? It means when they harvest early with, and this is not just wheat, garbanzo beans, chickpeas, wheat, they'll harvest early. And then to make sure that mold doesn't grow on anything, they hose this stuff off with glyphosate because it causes things to dry really quickly, because this just, and it kills plants. So when they dry it, then they don't wash off the glyphosate. They just poison you with it. And that's where many of our gut issues come in today. We don't have a gluten intolerance. We were never made to have a gluten intolerance. It's not natural. The same as peanut allergies are not actually natural either. It's just a generation of kids has been injected with peanut oil. So the issue is what's on them that is destroying you from the inside, and you have to address these things. You have the chronic aches and pains, you know, the fibromyalgia diagnoses, all of these things, tremors, you know, so it could show up as a normal little tick or a tremor. It could be diagnosed as something like Parkinson's or such if it's later on in life, right? And all of these go back to impaired motor control. Then you have hearing, speech, vision, your gait. You know, so if you've ever seen someone diagnosed with Parkinson's, not only do they have the tremors, but they also have problems with walking, you know, consistently because they're so neurotoxically polluted. You have blood issues, anemia. But what's interesting is if you look at different blood disorders, and maybe you look at issues like hemochromatosis, right, which is excess iron, which can be managed properly if you clean the system up, but also with sickle cell trait. And what's interesting with sickle cell trait is if you look at some of the literature and you go back and you look at what's the primary cause of sickle cell trait, there are genetic predispositions that people have. But as Dr. Ram goes over, you have the epigenetic component that goes along with our genetics. You have our genetics, our code, and then you have amongst that code, all these different genes, all these different SNPs. And a gene or a SNP can be active or inactive. And the activity or inactivity of each one of those little genes is really what controls our entire operating system. If they're damaged at some point, they don't work properly, or the wrong ones might turn on, or if they truly are damaged early on in fetal development, they can cause chromosomal disorders. Sickle cell trait is one of those. What the literature shows is that early fetal development to mercury actually is the primary trigger for the activation of those chromosomes that create sickle cell trait. So you might have the genetics, you might have the trait, but if you're not poisoned, that trait won't become active. Quite interesting. You also have all the cardiovascular risk factors, you know, so heart disease and heart attacks and and you can go along with heart failure, right? Because a heart attack is pretty bad. Heart failure is 100% fatal. You can come back from a heart attack. Heart failure is you don't get to play anymore. So how do we address this? Well, we've taken what nature created to clean up the environment and what's been proven for a few thousand years to be very effective at cleaning up the environment, very well proven for its natural ability to bind and trap heavy metals and different environmental toxins and nitrosamines and
viral fragments and glyphosate and graphene and mold spores and radioactive isotopes and nitrogen and ammonia. And we applied a bunch of nanotechnology, bioscience engineering traits to understand what process you can do to take this amazing crystal. And what CleanSlate is made from is a patent-approved proprietary process. I love to say it. Patented proprietary process. So we're going to pause from this real quick as we get into this, because I'm going to show you a couple things. But what Dr. Rom figured out how to do is how to take this amazing crystal and through a process that doesn't damage the crystal, but breaks it apart and allows the release when the timing is right of the secret that makes this crystal so special. This crystal is clinoptilolite. Clinoptilolite is a sodium aluminosilicate. The silica component is the secret to this amazing crystalline structure that was born from the depths of volcanoes. Volcanic eruptions, when volcanic ash mixed in seawater in different parts of the planet, it created these different minerals, crystals, and clays: bentonite, asbestos, quartz, clino, this entire class of zeolites. Right. So if someone talks about a zeolite and they don't talk about which one it is, run. They could be selling you asbestos and you don't even know. I wouldn't be surprised if some of them try to do it. But this one of the class is so unique, and it's the ugly one of the group. So if you look on the bottom, next to the bottom of the CleanSlate, see the ugly green rock. If we put quartz next to that, you'd say, wow, that's really pretty. But clinoptilolite's not the pretty one. Clinoptilolite is the one that they use to make kitty litter. Why? Because you want to bind the nitrogen and ammonia that comes off of cat pee. Clinoptilolite just so happens to be the one that's best used for it. Clinoptilolite is so powerful that if you ground it into a powder, if you take that rock that you see on the screen there and you grind it into a powder, in Europe, they consider it a drug. Why? Because they used it in Chernobyl in people to bind the radioactive isotopes people were exposed to very quickly in Chernobyl. The drug research on this amazing crystal in its powdered form shows that it upregulates tumor suppressor genes. It shows that it can be used for drug delivery and has been used in drug delivery for a long time. It has the ability to remediate viral fragments. It has the ability to improve yields of plants, that it can improve plant production by between 30 and 70%, depending upon the type of plant, right? Increase yield by 30 to 70% just by adding it to topsoil, because it has the ability to bind nitrogen and ammonia, but it will redistribute to the plants as the plants need. It's very energetically intelligent, which is what makes this crystal so special. But instead of just saying that we have patent proved, well, one thing to talk, another thing to show. And since the boss is not here today, we get to do show and tell. So this is her first patent, United States patent. This is on the United States Patent Trademark Office website, uspto.gov. If you want, you can search this yourself. You can Google it. You can go Google Scholar it. But if you type in this patent number 108-94721, it will pull up this patent as water-soluble, electrolyzed, solvolized clinoptilolite fragments and nutraceutical, pharmaceutical, and environmental products based thereon. Now, why is this important? Because this woman thinks so far beyond where anyone else is capable. She didn't just address the nutritional supplement or the nutraceutical components, but also the pharmaceutical components of use, as well as the use of this solution for environmental cleanup. And yes, if you're worried about cleaning up the environment, this solution is what will clean up the air, the water, and the soil. I'm not kidding. And you can see some of the outline in this patent. There's about 168 claims that are made. Basically, some of the outline, you might want to use this as a reference because you can reference a patent all day long. The absorption of water-soluble solvolized clinoptilolite fragments can aid in detoxification by binding to heavy metals, viruses, and environmental toxins, and can reduce reactive oxygen species and inflammation related to metals. The process and method described can provide an increase in energy, increase in growth factors that aid in hair, skin, and nail growth. It can provide an increase in focus, concentration, and memory. Water-soluble solvolized electrolyzed clinoptilolite fragments can be combined with one or more dietary supplements, including various vitamins, minerals, and sleep aids, to rejuvenate the cells and the environment during and after detoxification. Her initial filing was done on October 15th, 2015. You can see that her full name is still there as the inventor. And this was finally approved after being challenged for 5 years on January 19th, 2021. So, and you can take the time, you can go through here and reference this. One of the things that's really important is the other references. She didn't leave me out. I'm right in the middle of it, which is great. But you can go through all the claims, the description, and you can really geek out if you want to. Let me see. What did she say? Oh, we didn't hit on these yet. So when we talk about metals, we talked about depleted uranium a little bit. And if you've seen the movie Aaron Brockovich, you might be aware of hexavalent chromium. Both problems are solved. And those were reviewed, analyzed, and proven to be accurate. So hexavalent chromium, if you know people in Hinckley, California, they got hundreds of millions of dollars from PG&E, but they're still all dying from cancer because they actually didn't do anything to clean up the water. They just gave them money. You have a little something for them. But if you understand depleted uranium, you'll understand massive issue that we face as well. Thanks to the US military and its engagement in the Balkans and the Middle East. They nuked the entire region and didn't have to fire a nuclear weapon to do it. They're genius. They tried to kill everyone, poison everyone, and cause massive destruction, but didn't drop a single bomb, just fired many rounds of depleted uranium and used tanks that were loaded with it. It's horrible. So we get back to the work of J. Largy. So this gives you an understanding of why CleanSlate might be important. Not only does it have the ability to remove mercury, lead, arsenic, and viral particles, but also glyphosate and Agent Orange and depleted uranium. So if you have military veterans that you know that served in Vietnam, this is actually one of the greatest gifts you can give them. We've actually tried to work with some nonprofit organizations that provide benefits to veterans that were damaged in these areas, and we continue to do more work in that area. But if you have family members or friends or people in your community that served in Vietnam that are sick and they know that they were exposed to Agent Orange, whether you do it through a nonprofit organization, whether they have the ability to afford it themselves or you give it to them, this is probably the greatest gift you can ever provide them, because you honestly can help give them a life back. So as we touched on clinoptilolite, it has the ability to remove pretty much everything that's a problem. As you can see, animal studies have shown an increased risk of cancer from exposure to TCDD or dioxin. But clinoptilolite has the ability to help remediate some of the issues that correspond to it. It's tremendous in the gut. And if you understand the history of clinoptilolite, two of the primary digestive aids and the antidiarrheals are actually made from clinoptilolite. And if you want a little interesting piece of history because of how well this stuff works topically. And if you've ever used CleanSlate topically on a wound, you'll see this. And if you want the best example, if you ever get a paper cut, right? Paper cuts are like if it's the weirdest part of life, probably the most painful thing you can ever get is a bad paper cut, right? It just makes you squeal and you scream and it hurts and it stings and it's terrible. Women will give birth over probably getting a paper cut. Guys, we would just let both of us destroy us. We couldn't handle either one. But if you take your CleanSlate and you put a drop of CleanSlate on a paper cut, you'll watch it cauterize really quickly. This is a unique component to what clinoptilolite was made from. What it does and how it works is there was a product that was used in the military and I think used for first responders called Quick Clot. Quick Clot was initially made from clinoptilolite powder. And what made it unique is it came in a little like rosin bag that if you had an open wound, like a bullet wound, you could slap it on a bullet wound and the powder that was inside that bag would actually help cauterize the wound. And that was clinoptilolite. But they made a change to it during the Gulf War because they had a problem with the original formula that was causing radiation burns around bullet wounds in our military. Why did that happen? It happened because they were using depleted uranium rounds and the clinoptilolite was actually removing the depleted uranium from their bloodstream while they were bleeding out. So they changed the formula. But what you have to understand is that this little crystal is far beyond anything that we can imagine for its true capability. The Romans used this crystal to line the aqueducts to make sure that their water tasted better because they had a massive problem with lead in their water supply. What was not known and not discovered until 2,000 years later, only a couple years ago was this actually discovered, was the fact that the Mayans, all the way across the globe, simultaneously were doing the same thing to clean their water supply. So this is not new. It's very well known. And what's interesting is asbestosis, mesothelioma derived from asbestosis. Exposure to asbestos in houses where they used to use asbestos. And here's a little history lesson. Why did they initially use asbestos in ceiling panels? Because asbestos is a zeolite. Asbestos has a similar porous structure, but a different molecular structure than clinoptilolite. Clino is like a honeycomb cage structure, where asbestos is more needle-like. So in its powdered form, or if it creates dust and you inhale said dust, because it's needle-like, it gets into your lungs and then sticks into your lungs and causes asbestosis-based mesothelioma, causes cancer. Well, clinoptilolite is actually helpful in remediating said issue. Kind of interesting. And you can look at the nanoporous history. And if you want a really, really fun time, you can do what I've done over the last 10 years. And you can go on PubMed, or you can use Google Scholar if you want. I prefer PubMed because it's where everything is published and you can really geek out. But you can search clinoptilolite and pick a subject, and you're going to find stuff published on it because of the properties of removal of metals and how what it's capable of doing. But if you go a step further and you start looking at clinoptilolite and its ability to remove mercury and lead and aluminum and these other inorganic compounds, and then you do a second search of looking at mercury, lead, aluminum, and pick a diagnosis of your choosing, you'll see the correlation. Metals cause clino, remove said cause. It's that simple. Cadmium and lead toxicity. The microbiome. Here we get into some of the fun. So when we look at how the gut is affected by heavy metals and what these metals damage, you can see on the graph here on our right that you have different components that affect your gut and your microbiome. You have antibiotics, you have heavy metals, you have pesticides, you have artificial sweeteners, you have other chemicals, you have PCBs, PBDEs, PBEs. All of these different environmental chemicals will get into your lungs through what you breathe, or into your gut through what you consume, and even what you breathe. Could be water, could be food, could be beverages, what have you. They're all going to get into your system, and then they start to cause changes, right? So you have irritable bowel issues, you have a leaky gut, you have an inability for your gut to function properly, where you then aren't able to properly digest carbohydrates. Why is it in our diet that we've had people have to focus on the fad diet of the week over the last 2 decades, when prior these things weren't important? Why is it when you look at photographs of people in their 70s, in the 1970s, when people would hang out on the beach, there were no obese people, there weren't a lot of fat people back then? It just didn't exist, because the chemicals that were in our environment didn't exist. We didn't start to get hammered by environmental pollution until about the 80s. And then we've started to see these issues. And now you see all these fad diets of, oh, you have to cut out carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are bad. No, carbohydrates aren't bad. The fact of the matter is we have an inability to properly process carbohydrates because of being polluted. But a lot of those carbohydrates, wheat, flour, different components that we get, even your gluten-free options, are all loaded with heavy metals and glyphosate. And if you're one that likes to be gluten-free and you're eating rice as an alternative, here's the problem with rice. Rice remediates arsenic out of the environment. So while you might be taking an alternative to the glyphosate, you're actually getting higher amounts of arsenic in microdoses. And these are not things that are ideal to deal with. If you don't believe me, look up rice arsenic exposure in Southeast Asia, and you can look at the complications that kids and people get in these less industrialized countries that have rice as a staple, and what it does to their bodies. So you have the issues with lead, cadmium, that lead to excessive local systemic oxidative stress, which disrupts metabolic pathways. Also, these heavy metals cause massive amounts of negative inflammation, not only in your gut, but also in your vascular system. And they damage the endothelial lining of your vascular system, which we're probably going to hit on in a second because I haven't cheated and gone ahead on the slides, but also damage the lining of your gut. And the key to having a proper functioning microbiome, first step, is the removal of the environmental toxins that are creating the chaos in there. You can try to throw in all the prebiotics, all the probiotics, all the good stuff that you can drink your kombucha, you can spend all the money you want on all the prebiotics and probiotics and different things. If you're not addressing the underlying cause first, you're trying to rebuild a house while it's still on fire. What Dr. Ram goes over is your body is a city, right? And that you're the mayor of the city, and that these toxins are much like having, well, we could say Antifa, right? In your city, where they're just hell bent on creating chaos and havoc and destroying everything. Well, if you have different parts of your city, different blocks that have been destroyed, and there is a presence of these marauders that are creating chaos, and you go and try to start rebuilding the damage to those areas without first addressing what caused the problems in the first place, you're going to have a couple things that happen. You're going to have all your tools, all your goods get stolen, right? They're going to get damaged. Or if you are able to start doing repairs, they're going to be vandalized. This is the same process that takes place in your body. If you don't address the underlying cause, that which is causing all the damage, you never get to rebuild. Hence, CleanSlate serves as that foundation. But since the amazing Dr. Ram doesn't just focus on one component, because here what we know in this community is one thing very specific. There is no silver bullet. There's no one thing that you can do that's going to take care of everything. You have to build, right, on your foundation. You don't just lay the foundation and leave it be, because there's a lot of work left to be done. ReLive Greens, as we've talked about in the past on previous conversations with Dr. Ram about what her background was and why she created ReLive. You have all of these key compounds from their natural sources, right? So you have the cruciferous vegetables, you have kale, broccoli, you have benefits from blueberries and quercetin, right? You have spinach, you have aloe vera, which I can see on there. You have, they didn't put it on, cayenne pepper, MCT powder. Why are these important? Because they actually help your metabolism and metabolic function. And if you improve your metabolism, which means you're producing more energy, which means you can heal. But there's a couple really unique components as it pertains to some of these components found in ReLive that, as you're using CleanSlate, then begin to add the key rebuilding components for the body, right? One of the disconnects that we have, that we've been taught today, is something that the pharmaceutical industry has done such a good job of training and indoctrinating the population into, that the nutritional supplement industry has adopted. And it's this: we are taught to either be prescribed or buy something based on a single premise. So in our world of nutritional supplementation today, you have companies that will sell you a vitamin C supplement, and then they'll sell you, oh, you have to have vitamin D, and then you need zinc, and then you need quercetin, and then you need probiotics, and you need a couple different probiotics because, well, there's multiple in the body. There's your microbiome has trillions of fungal cells, viral cells, human cells, this amazing mix, and they want to send in a couple different, components to assist prebiotic or probiotic benefits. Whereas something really unique takes place in nature, right? When you look at a natural compound, it could be banana flour, the extractive, extracting banana flour, drying bananas, grinding them up, making the flour. You have inulin, you have the total content of everything that God put in those, that nature provided to provide the tools. But you don't need them synthesized. You need them extracted properly in the right manners, to destroy them, but also putting them in the right combinations with other ingredients to create a compounding effect. And this is where the bioscience engineering component is so important, that you have to have a background in real bioscience engineering to figure out how to use the right amounts of what ingredients combined with other ingredients and maybe other compounds that all synergistically come to work together. So you can look at, the probiotic benefits of Bacillus coagulans and Lactobacillus plantarum and other lactobacillus compounds that are found in ReLive, for what they can do in the gut and how they can assist glutathione production. It's important. Got to remove the mercury that damages glutathione. You have benefits of dietary fibers. You can see that there's inulin and some other prebiotic powders that serve as, forgot my word, additional fiber for the gut, but it's in the powdered form and it looks green, so you don't think that they're there. Some of the components which we touched on last week, like chlorella, are actually very beneficial on their own for assisting in the chelation, the binding or grabbing onto of heavy metals in the gut. Chlorella is actually really good at binding mercury in the gut. So you're going to have some additional benefits of detoxification binders in your gut because of some of the plant compounds, in addition to what CleanSlate is doing. They all work together. You also have spirulina, which we've touched on heavily as Dr. Ram went over. She used a ton of spirulina when she was taking care of her brain tumors. There is a large amount of spirulina in ReLive because of those benefits and because of some of the other, benefits of spirulina, which you can see of its benefits when combined with zinc in addressing arsenic poisoning. Well, where are you going to get the zinc to benefit spirulina? You get it from the other compounds that are in ReLive in their natural source. You're not going to see the amount of trace minerals, the amount of vitamin A, the amount of vitamin C, the amount of vitamin D, the amount of vitamin K, the amount of quercetin, the amount of all of these different components, because they're all sourced in their natural environment. They're not extracted and then saying, we added this, we added this, we added this. They're all in their natural forms, which makes them a little more bioavailable and makes them easier to work with together. So we got our references. We made it through. Wow. We did it. And I did it under an hour. And what we can do now, because this is one of my favorite things to do, since Dr. Ram is not here, she's in another meeting, and this is class, right? This is Root U. You can't have class without opening things up for questions. So I'm going to look at the chat box because there's a few chats here. Let's do this. Oops, I don't want to blow that up. So if you have a question, I'm going to go through the chats here since I didn't even start, since I talked all the way through it. If you have a question, you can raise your hand because it's class. If you don't know how to raise your hand, well, you don't get to talk. Lori has a question. Lori, I'll ask you to unmute.
Clayton, how are you?
Talk to me. I haven't seen you forever. How are you doing?
I'm okay. Good to talk to you. Talk to me about ferritin. You briefly talked about how heavy metals block absorption.
Yes.
Talk to me about ferritin, but iron level is okay.
Ferritin for like iron?
Yeah.
So what do you want to talk about?
Well, I don't have any ferritin. How come I don't have any? Do I still have metals in the way? Is that what you're talking about with receptors and?
How are you testing? How are you testing, or what are you testing for?
Chronic fatigue.
So they're testing ferritin levels as a measurement for chronic fatigue.
Yep.
Okay. So hold on. This answer is strictly for educational and entertainment purposes, and I'm not talking about any disease states or anything. just so we get through that again. We're not talking about chronic fatigue or anything, and a diagnosis of chronic fatigue. Maybe someone just doesn't have enough energy because their metabolic pathways are blocked by heavy metals. Oh, I tried to say that all in one sentence without breathing. That's why I can't rap anymore. My lung function I can't breathe in enough to talk continually. So if you're looking at ferritin, and if you're looking at other blood markers, right? If those binding sites are blocked, and this goes into women's health too, dramatically when we look at hormones like estrogen and testosterone, but primarily estrogen, right? Because the heavy metals will block those binding sites. So you won't see their availability, or you'll test like you don't have enough of them. Sometimes you'll test like you have too much of them, like estrogen at times, where women get hormonal. Well, you actually don't have too much. What you have is a problem of like lead and cadmium that are blocking those binding sites that decrease the assimilation and the use of the natural biological hormone that is being produced in your body. And that hormone builds up in your bloodstream, so you become a hormonal wreck. And it's all because you're lead toxic. And ladies, if you don't know where the lead comes from, lead is primarily stored in bone. And with the lead being stored in bone, when you reach about 50, it starts to leach out of bone, which causes your bone to become brittle, which means they they could diagnose you as needing more vitamin D and saying you have brittle bones, when actually you're just lead toxic, because lead will block those binding sites for estrogen. But lead, as we were talking about, is also neurotoxic. So it gives you brain fog and makes you go a little bit nuts. And they call that menopause. Kind of crazy. So you can see that with ferritin. You can see it with a whole host of other things as well. If you're still polluted with metals, it takes time. So hopefully that is helpful. And we didn't hit on 0N and why 0N is really beneficial in that, but it's good. Birgit, if you ask about getting money on Wednesdays and Fridays, yes, you can.
No, I wanted to tell you that nobody understands you because Simon Uran is muted and cannot unmute herself. But I understood everything and I love your performance today. Only we have to translate it. Maybe you look into the unmuting the translator, Simone.
Oh.
Uran.
Oh, there we go. Now she's unmuted.
There she is. Okay.
Well,
okay.
We'll blame Patrick for that. That was his fault.
Okay.
We have so much love for our German contingency. How can we have our translator on mute? Oh, well. And let me see here. So we got those. Oh, Birgit, you're right. Friday is going to be the big day. Let me see. Jennifer has her hand raised. It's her turn. I can ask her to unmute. We'll do a couple minutes more of Q&A. Let me go through all the questions here. Numbers of many of these symptoms are increasing dramatically. Yep. Okay, Jennifer doesn't have a question. Anybody else got a question? I'm going to go through the chat here. Can we connect celiac disease to toxicity? Absolutely. You know what? Let's do this live. Hold on. Let's go here. Let me see. We'll go to Safari. So let's all do this together. We're doing better living through family time. So we're just going to go, I'm just going to type it in here. Celiac disease and mercury. Is 1.87. Resulting mercury levels were significantly higher in celiac patients following a gluten-free diet. Well, go figure. No differences were found regarding fish intake and a number of amalgam fillings, just that you're poisoned. So you can see there's lots of different blood levels of lead and mercury in celiac disease. That was published in 2017. So let's see what this one says. Autoimmune disease, yeah. Findings of CD, heavy metals association are, to our knowledge, novel, and we conclude that decreased levels of heavy metals are most likely consequence of CD in the US population. There you go. That was done in 2017. That was easy. But let's go here and let's look at celiac disease and glyphosate. Booyah, Stuart. Huh. Let's see, glyphosate pathways to modern diseases. Oh, this was published in 2013. First one that pops up. Huh. Gluten intolerance. Well, makes it kind of clear, doesn't it? Gluten intolerance is a growing epidemic in the United States and increasingly worldwide. Celiac sprue is a more specific disorder. And it probably gets into the fact that, let me see, some have suggested that recent surge in celiac disease is simply due to better diagnostic tools. However, a recent study, frozen sera, obtained between 1948 and 1954 from antibodies to gluten and compared to the results with sera obtained from a matched sample from people living today, fourfold increase in the incidence of celiac disease in the newer cohort compared to the older one. Oh, this kind of goes along with what we were just saying. Is it not crazy when you can do a 5-second search and the data shows that we're not lying? Who knew? So, not too difficult, right? Anybody can do this, and it's what we encourage everyone to do, right? Because they say knowledge is power. But when someone asks you a question about, oh, should I use this for this condition? you really don't have to ask anyone else. Just ask Google Scholar. Don't use Google because they kind of tweak all the stuff. You can ask Google Scholar. They kind of tweak things a little bit too. Just don't ask her about COVID or anything like that and ivermectin, and you'll get honest answers. But if you ask about heavy metals and such, they'll give you the information. But don't ask about heavy metals and ivermectin, because then they'll come for you. They're like, well, wait a minute, you're asking too many questions now. It's craziness. Let me see here. There's a good, everybody did good on talking about Agent Orange. That's great. Nicole, there's 168 claims that were approved in the patent. So yes, there was 183 initially, but she took a couple back out. Let me see here. Oh, there's. Let's see, show slide with references again. How long or how many bottles of CleanSlate would you recommend we use before moving on to Restore and Zero In? Actually, I would use them simultaneously. You could start on CleanSlate for a couple days prior, but here's the beautiful part with how our bodies work. We are quantum, right? We are not physical. So the fact that the old thinking has been you have to physically start a process, and that process takes place, and as that physical process goes through, then you can, that's pharmacokinetics, right? That's pharmacology, right? That's a matter of training and indoctrination to get us away from the fact that we are light, we are energy. What Dr. Ram has done, and we don't talk about this much, and we probably won't, because the people, the majority of people can't quite comprehend or understand what she's truly done yet, which is why we've coined the term quantumceuticals. She understands how to use harmonics, how to use magnets, how to use energy, how to use frequencies, how to use, when she's communicating to make a specific formula, they're working on a quantum basis. So it's all energetic and frequency based, which is why CleanSlate works so well, even with one drop, which is something that's beyond me, because that is not a physical, it's not a physical component, right? There is a massive physical component to what the fragments are doing to bind metals, but the frequency component is even more impactful. So it's quite cool. And Harry's having too much fun chatting with other people while he's listening. And I see him smile and he's not chatting to me. It makes me feel left out. Let's see here what we got. Chronic fatigue can also link to radiation exposure. So this is a great point that was made on radiation exposure and wireless microwave devices and Wi-Fi, 5G, which we've talked about a little bit. And here's a lesson. Newt, I'll get you in a second after I rant about frequencies. Frequencies are a problem if I had to let that operative word sit in for a second. If you maintain the signal resonators that those frequencies need, if you possess the antennas needed for those frequencies to actually conduct what they do in your body, then you will have issues. And this is an important way to understand these two things. The pineal gland is the light center of the brain. You hear me talk consistently about we are light, because we need light. We need sunlight to produce vitamin D, right? We need sunlight to recharge. We need grounding. We need to be connected to the electromagnetic frequencies of the earth, of the soil, of the ground, to better connect us, right? Because we are an antenna, right? If you're grounded and your pineal gland is decalcified, because inside your pineal gland is something that's really, really unique. There's little crystalline resonators, just these little crystals that are the receivers of frequencies and light. They come through your eyes, which is why when I'm outside, I try not to wear my glasses. because I like the sun. I don't wear suntan lotion, any of that crap. It's terrible for you. It causes cancer. But if you have your pineal gland decalcified, and we didn't touch on fluoride, you can go on the YouTube channel, type in fluoride, get the whole video that we did on fluoride with Dr. Dory. It's great. Fluoride actually calcifies your pineal gland. That disconnects you from our primary antenna. That is our primary antenna. That disconnects us from our light source, from our primary energy source. And then because they've loaded us with mercury, lead, aluminum, graphene, other toxic metals, and if you remember, if you want to make sure that I'm not crazy and I'm not completely stupid, and I said completely, right? Because I'm on the spectrum. My range of stupidity will vary greatly. But if you remember back in the day, Harry, this is long before you were born, that televisions used to have rabbit ears and antennas on roofs and whatnot before we used satellites and everything. Those antennas just so happen to be made of aluminum, which is the same thing that they've been putting in you since you were conceived. The same thing that's injected into you as a child, along with a little mercury, a lot of mercury, actually. The same thing that's been injected into you, if you so choose, over the last few years. They're putting little nano antennas into you to be a receptacle and a receiver of the frequencies they're trying to program you with that come from 5G towers, Wi-Fi, everything else. So if you don't have the receiver, the frequencies won't disrupt you as much, if at all. And it's funny because I've talked to people that have said they can't drive a Tesla because it makes them sick. I drive one all the time. It doesn't affect me. Never had problems with my head other than being a little bit crazy. I don't get headaches from, but I also haven't started using ear pods until we had root pods, right? And if you don't have the antenna, you won't have the resonance with the frequencies. So important. And if you can show me anybody that's effective at removing all the radio frequencies, you know what, you're a better person than me, because I'm thinking you're not going to be able to win that battle quite yet. But you can remove what's in you that's resonating with everything on the outside. Just think of it this way, right? If you're able to pick up radio frequencies, like if I was able to walk around and I could get 97.9 in my head without having to listen to it on the radio, I figured that there was something wrong in here that was picking up those signals. Same way. Let me see what else we got. Jennifer has her hand raised. I'm asking you to unmute, Jennifer. Can't unmute you.
Can you hear me?
There we go. You win for the day.
Yay, sorry about that. Hi, Clayton, and hello, everyone. I have a loved one that is going off of Lexapro, an antidepressant, and gabapentin.
Oh yeah, from neuropathy because of being so toxic and the neurological damage to the extremities.
Yeah.
I don't know these things, but yeah,
okay.
Go ahead.
Major car accident and has neuropathy in right foot now. So not even age 50. So decided to just go off meds. And I gave Zero-N 1 capsule for the last 3 days. Someone that's been on antidepressant, that Lexapro for years. What would you recommend? I know that this is, your medical disclaimer thing, but I just need help.
Yeah, so they really need CleanSlate, and okay. I'd start with 1 capsule of Zero-N, do that for a couple of days, and then add 1 in the afternoon. Okay. But let me, since my wife isn't here, I'm going to have the honest conversation for everyone. I don't recommend everyone do what I do. I don't recommend everyone do what Nude does. What I recommend is that everybody find what works for them. Because when it comes to neurotransmission, and granted, CleanSlate and Restore are crucial in this aspect, because CleanSlate and Restore are going to clean up the your neurological system for one, but also going to work on cleaning up the gut. So zero in is going to be more beneficial at producing dopamine and serotonin. Some people are so low with their neurotransmitter levels and production of neurotransmitters that one might make them feel a little bit better, but 2 or 3, maybe not all at once, is something that will be extremely beneficial for them.
Okay.
But there's
I'm
caveat.
sorry.
No, I was going to say there's a caveat to this. When working with zero in and with CleanSlate in an environment where you have someone that's been medicated for an extended period of time, and this pertains to all types of medication, could be high blood pressure medication, could be cholesterol medication, could be SSRIs, and the whole host of stuff. Those are the most popular ones, I think. You have to watch your dosage, right? Because what happens is you're going to improve metabolism by using CleanSlate, Zero In, Restore, ReLive, as we've touched on. By improving your metabolism, that means you're improving drug metabolism as well as nutrition metabolism and systemic metabolism. By improving drug metabolism, that means the drugs can work better. That opens up 2 things. That means, 1, the benefits of alleged drug might amplify, meaning you might not need as much of it. But the other side of the equation is, you know, the rest of the commercial, the 70% of the commercial that says these are the side effects, you can see more of those. So if you're being medicated, you really need to work with your dosage. You do need to work with a medical professional, because it's likely that you're going to need less of them, and eventually you won't need them at all. Because here's a secret for everyone. I don't know if you knew this. We've got like 240 people on here. Guys, this is the greatest. Hold on. We need to talk about this. This is a secret. Healthy people don't need prescription medications. I kid you not. I'm not joking. For real. So just be cognizant of that, but really work with it, because each one of us is unique, right? And we have to find what works best for us. For me, because of how I function, how I run, I take 3 zero in mornings, or I'll take 2 at night, or 1 at night if I'm going to bed, 1 or 2 at night for me before I go to bed. If I'm only going to get 4 to 5 hours of sleep, depending upon travel schedules and whatnot, is phenomenal for me. But I had to learn a couple things. I had to learn how to control my intention. Do not do that if you don't know how to control your thoughts. Because if you can't shut your brain off and tell yourself that I'm going to relax, you will work all night long. That's fact. So
I've done that.
yeah, everyone's had that experience at some point. They're going, you know, I took a zero in and I didn't stop working until 3 a.m. I'm like, yeah, it happens.
So just one more question. So CleanSlate should be first thing in the morning, and then can we also do the zero in at the same time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Take your CleanSlate first thing in the morning, and then before you go to bed. It's best twice a day.
Okay.
And CleanSlate and Zero In are actually very, very collaborative in this aspect. And I've got a bunch of data that we haven't released yet on Zero In, which we'll do here shortly.
Okay. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. CleanSlate is ideal working with your circadian rhythm, right? So if you remember from everything that we've gone over, the circadian rhythm is what controls our sleep and wake cycles. And it's at night that your body is detoxifying and doing all its regenerative and recovery work. So with that being the premise, you have to have support at night from a detox perspective. So if you were one that said, I'm only going to take CleanSlate once a day, take it at night. That way in the morning, when you pee stuff out, you'll be impressed. But taking it in the morning helps flush stuff out from the night before, but also clean up stuff during the day. But So ideally morning and night, but if you're only going to go once a day, nighttime. And it's amazing from that point. I forgot the rest of my thought because I haven't taken my 0 in today. Because like everyone else, I'm waiting anxiously. Verena, it's your turn.
Thank you. Is it possible that the give me back my use might trigger something that needs to come out? I'm asking because since I started on the give me back my use, I developed a really nasty hand eczema. I mean, I've had the eczema like once a year, more or less, over the past few years, but I'm just kind of wondering if there's something that, well,
That's
I need
awesome.
to get rid of. Let's put it that way. And
Yeah,
if
your
it-
body, your body's most likely clearing an issue, right? So you'll see that as your liver starts to go into regen mode. And people have seen this with all different kinds of stuff, is they'll have past issues. You see this with herpes and eczema and psoriasis. And how people are like, wait a minute, I don't want herpes to flare up again. But what you'll see is stuff like that will flare because your body will push it out and then it'll clear and it won't come back.
Okay. And this could be triggered by the give me back my use. I mean, I would have expected it from CleanSlate, but I was wondering if you see a relation with the give me back my use.
You know what? Give Me Back My Youth is going to kickstart the regeneration process. So with its addition, I mean, when we look at tissue regeneration and collagen, you've been on CleanSlate for a while, it's cleaning stuff up, but then when the body kicks into, real big time regen mode, it's like, oh, I can get rid of this now, I can clear this out. You're going to see different things happen, which is kind of cool. So yeah, it can happen. And I don't know how you did it, but I love the echo.
Sorry for the echo, thanks.
It's kind of cool. I want that. Karina's turn.
Okay. Hi. You mentioned earlier that Crohn's disease and heavy metals are somehow connected. You didn't say a lot about that, but how did you mean that? So because my husband has Crohn's disease, and so it would be interesting to know more about that.
Well, let's do the same thing we just did before. So let's look up Crohn's disease and mercury.
And what would you recommend?
Oh, I forgot the apostrophe.
What?
Say that again.
And what would you recommend in addition to CleanSlate? What would you recommend?
Zero. I would, if I had my choice, I would say zero in, restore, relive, and give me back my youth. And,
okay.
and mitochondrial support is really, really, really important in that entire process, because mitochondrial support is what's going to provide the energy at a mitochondrial cellular level for everything to start kicking in and working faster. You can think of like mitochondrial, what mito does as, well, it's like putting a supercharger on your car, right? You might have an engine that's running, but if you can supercharge it, you're going to get much greater output for the same thing that you've been doing. That's what mito does. So I pulled up, if you can see my screen.
Yes.
You can just search Crohn's disease and mercury, and you can see the article that was published in 2016, on Crohn's and idiopathic inflammatory bowel diseases. Crohn's and ulcerative colitis are all multifactorial diseases, yada, yada, yada. And you can look at, let's see, an epigenetic mechanism like DNA methylation, histone modification, and altered expression of mRNAs. Oh, could explain the connection between genes and environmental factors in triggering the development of IBD. I mean, that's pretty much it. You take a picture of that. Let's do this. I'm going to do this right now. Bloop. So you can take that. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to put it over here. I'm going to go here. I'm going to not send Birgit a message. I'm going to send it to everyone. I'm going to take that, and you can quote me. Done.
Cool. Thank you.
So, and this is honestly how simple and easy it is, right? Is you can say, oh, well, how do you mean that? Well, and it's easy for me because I've done this for 18 years, and and honestly, I'm telling you, no different. I've spent 18 years asking these questions and going down these rabbit holes and saying, okay, if this one does this and this one does this, and this is correlated to this, and this is correlated to that, I can see this and this and this. It's only from experience. Right? I'm supposed to, Dr. Ram and I are weighing whether or not I get my doctorate. And because I want to, if we do it, I'll do a PhD in environmental epidemiology, because the more you dive into this, if you have an interest in it, right? Because for me, 18 years ago was kind of where I got, the first tap on my shoulder that God said, do that. This is what you're made for. And then 7 years ago, he gave me her and said, this is who you're supposed to do it with, serve her. Hence Root, hence the Pegacorn doing what she's made to do. But that's kind of the journey and everything. And I think this is what's most crucial that we will continually hit on. Everything that we're going over, everything that we're teaching, everything that we're discussing, it's not us making the narrative. All we're doing is solving the issues that have been most prevalent for the last 50 years. So by doing that, it sounds profound because no one's ever been able to do it. And no one's really wanted to address the underlying cause of the problem, because even the nutritional supplement industry, if they put you on supplements that actually work, right, you wouldn't need them anymore if they weren't really doing what we're doing. But since we're actually reversing age and doing everything else, kind of makes it a win. Got it?
Okay, thanks.
Michael. He's got his hand raised. He's been waiting. He's probably like, I'm not going to unmute now. Oh, there he goes.
What is the true cause of warts?
The what?
Warts. Warts on the fingers, on the skin.
Oh. That's an interesting. I'm a huge fan of salicylic acid when it comes to warts initially, but you can use if you use a little CleanSlate with a little salicylic acid, depending upon the kind of wart.
Yeah.
If you put like a little CleanSlate, then you take an aspirin, grind it up and put that on there. And then I like duct tape. If I've got them, I haven't had to work forever, and just put a little duct tape on it, wrap that thing up, seal it. It'll be gone in a few days.
So you use aspirin on top of the O1.
Yeah, because the salicylic acid that's in, that is aspirin, actually is really good at killing warts, killing fungus.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But you could, depending upon what you wanted to do and what you wanted to try, you could put a little Restore and CleanSlate on there along with, actually that'd be the cool part, is put like a drop of CleanSlate, then you rub it with a little Restore, then you put a little salicylic acid on top of it, and then you wrap that in duct tape and just seal it. Oh yeah. That little bugger won't stand a chance.
Thank you.
Like it. See, now we're doing home remedies too. The things I knew for a long time. That's what you get from growing up in the country and running around outside and getting exposed to fungus and having plantar's warts. Cool. I'm gonna mute. Gail's turn.
Hello. Let's see. Okay, so I have two questions.
I have one answer. Let's see how
Okay. First question. I have a sister with really bad Crohn's disease, but there's 5 of us. So why would she be the only one to have Crohn's disease? That's my first question. Do
What's
you
the
know?
second? See if I can answer them both the same way.
Okay, the second one is for somebody who is on a controlled medication, like a what's it, buprenorphine. I don't know if you're familiar with that. What would you recommend? Yeah, these are two totally different questions.
The answer is because your sister is special and she's really jacked up. No, I'm kidding. I was gonna say that would work.
Is special.
Is she the oldest one?
She's the middle child.
Well, the middle childs are always the jacked up ones. I mean, they're traumatized because they're stuck in the middle. And, the thing is with those issues is you have to look at environmental exposure, lifestyle, and environmental exposure is food, it's air, it's where she lived. There's the interesting component if you're looking at family history, right? Because of what moms are exposed to. You have women that had no problem getting pregnant early on and had babies and wanted to have a baby later on in life, and then will have trouble conceiving or will have issues because of their additional exposure throughout the time that they conceived the first time and they wanted to get pregnant again. So what you then just look at is, okay, what's your lifestyle been like? Where have you been? You have, standard familial factors, but if someone's more sensitive, there's some other stuff that they were exposed to, or that their body's even more sensitive to some other components, but it all comes back to the same thing.
Okay.
And when it comes to buprenorphine and some of the other components, let me make sure that I'm
So what would be the best product for her to with the Crohn's disease?
CleanSlate Restore. It depends. Okay, so let me make this clear for all conditions, and then people can back off based on what fits them initially. CleanSlate, 0N, Restore, Give Me Back My Youth, ReLive, and mitochondrial support are all created strategically to work together.
Okay.
Right? Natural barrier support is kind of that catalyst and an additive when your body needs a little extra kick. But those 6 are designed strategically. It's the reason that they were released all together so quickly. What we've done over the last 2 months is absurd. I'll tell you, it's.
Well, I don't know anything about, this is my first.
Yeah. Perfect. So
yeah,
they're all designed to work together. If you have a budget that you're trying to hit and say, well, this one, I can't afford all of them, so I need to start somewhere, I would start. It's tough. If you just need a foundation to say, I'm going to start with one, you start with CleanSlate.
okay.
If you want to do a couple, you do CleanSlate, Restore, and this is where it gets interesting. I would do the Trinity.
Okay.
Right? CleanSlate, 0, and Restore. Then if you wanted to add one on top of it, see, this is where we get into layering fun. I would go with either Mito or Give Me Back My Youth. See? It's let me see what the community says. I would do the Trinity, and then whether it's ReLive, Give Me Back My Youth, or Mito.
Okay.
You can kind of play them. I honestly would look at them and say which one feels the best energetically.
Okay.
Because all 3 of them are going to have a tremendous impact. It really just depends on which one and where you're going to see that.
Okay.
Ideally, all of them, but
ideally, we'd all have millions and millions of dollars. Ideally,
I can show you how to do that if you like to do show and tell.
Yep, I would like to know how to do that.
We have an ecosystem for that.
Okay, cool.
But
so then the next question would be the about the detox.
So with opioids, and this includes heroin in general, right? And I love how, I'm not going to get into the CIA's control of Afghanistan and all the poppies and all the heroin and everything produced in the drug trade. I won't get into that. But did I just get into that? I think I got into that. I'm not going to get into that though.
Or how our government is the biggest drug dealer in the world.
Oh, stop it. We're not going to talk about arms trading and drug dealing.
Okay.
This is not the platform. This is Root You.
Right. Oops.
I haven't been able to shoot Quantum Shift in a while. But the key thing when working with all drugs, and we can put cocaine, But because heroin and the opioids are so addictive and so horrible, a couple things come along with this. And I've seen this personally, right? Not in my own personal use. I've never used any of those drugs. It's the part that gets me when people talk about using cocaine. I'm like, you're actually taking drugs to feel like I do normally. This is crazy. Like, all right. But the effects that CleanSlate has on the body and what those opioids are is it can clean up the body so quickly. This applies to ketamine as well. You know, we've actually seen it with ketamine, with an individual who had Lyme disease that was being treated with ketamine for the pain. And we detoxed him so quickly in 3 days that he overdosed on ketamine on day 4.
Wow.
On his normal dose. It was amazing. It was really cool. Didn't kill him. That was a good part, but he had an effect. If you're using opioids or heroin and you want to get off them, CleanSlate starts to detoxify your system so quickly that your tolerance drops precipitously day 1. So you need a lot less to get the same effect. Now this goes twofold. If you're working on getting off of the pain meds, it is insanely valuable. If you're a user or you've used, and on either side, if you've had an opioid problem and you've been popping pills, or if you are using heroin or its extracts, right? Fentanyl and everything else. The CleanSlate will clean you up so quickly. If you go back and use, based on what you thought you were still at, you know, your level of tolerance that you were using at, you will kill yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You will die. And I've had that conversation with people really bluntly, because you get cleaned up so fast that you will overdose just like that, and you'll kill yourself. So this is also why 0 is so crucial in this environment, because the feelings that you get, the dopamine hit that you get from using heroin is so brief. Same for cocaine. It is so brief, yet such a rush that your brain wants to chase it. 0 replaces that need.
Okay.
And that's not just from a fun standpoint. That is, I've had crackheads tell me and cokeheads go, this stuff is better because of what it's doing. For those that like psilocybin, right? Because there's a big push in fungus. People are like, psilocybin's the next part of, the health trend and whatnot because of DMT. Just so everyone here knows, my wife is smarter than all of us combined. And there's 2 little components that make 0 really special, which is the pine bark and the mucuna pruriens, which is velvet bean seed extract. Those 2 little components are more powerful than mushrooms, just so you know. And it's the reason you don't need a lot of them, because the neurotransmitter standpoint, and it's why if you take like 4 0 you will feel euphoric almost, and you'll feel outstanding. You don't need the other stuff. You just need to figure out how to tweak your biochemistry and feel amazing, because there's a little secret to DMT. DMT is produced endogenously when you have proper neurotransmitter function and proper systemic function. DMT is produced from serotonin. So extra serotonin converts to DMT, usually done at night, because when you put your intention into going to sleep, serotonin converts to melatonin through your freshly decalcified pineal gland. Extra serotonin converts to DMT, so you get lucid dreams. That's the pathways. You can do that during the day as well, based on your intention and how many you take. So if you want to go explore the woods, cuckoo cuckoo. So there you go. That was probably a little longer.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We'll get Eleanor.
Hi, Clayton. I have a question about a patient with breast cancer. It's hormone sensitive, and she wants to take Give Me Back My Youth. But I was told women with hormone sensitive breast cancer shouldn't take colostrum. So can she take it or not?
Is she using CleanSlate and Restore already?
Yes.
Is she using it topically?
What do you mean with topically?
I mean, take a few drops of CleanSlate and some Restore and rub it on her breast at the same time she's taking it orally.
Oh, she just had the operation. The surgery was just a week ago, so
Okay,
she
good. I would
didn't
do
use.
that.
Sorry?
I would still use them topically.
Yes.
And then I would send an email to science@rootbrands.com.
Mhm.
Because and just put the question, reference this conversation and ask the question, and then I'll have the science team get back to it. You know what, let me hold on, since actually I won't go bug her now because she's in a meeting. I need to talk to the one that's got an oncology background on that.
Okay.
So I don't think there's a problem. I don't think there would ever be a complication with it. I think it would be very supportive in the regeneration process.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
But I'm not going to answer that because hold on. Let me do what I need to do. Oops, not that one. Again, this information is for educational and entertainment purposes. We're not talking about diseases. There we go. We covered the disclaimer again, even though we answer questions on these things. So yeah, I would shoot the question to science. We'll get the best answer for it. You know, it's nice when your wife has actually been an adjunct professor in oncology at one of the top cancer research centers in the world. You go, hey, babe. And, you know, it's one of the few cancers she hasn't had. You know, she didn't have breast cancer, skin cancer, malignant melanoma, you know, all that stuff, brain tumors, spine tumors, all the little stuff, right? You go, but we'll get that answered. It's cool.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Nancy gets the last word if she wants it. She's been waiting.
I do. I do. Thanks, Clayton. Yeah, I just wrote it in the comments, but I had a TIA on August 22nd, no, 12th, and they sent in the hospital, they did an MRI with contrast, and they found that I have a tumor in behind my left ear. And so I was wondering, can I still use, I'm on everything except for I quit using the Give Me Back My Youth just in case.
Behind your left ear. I think Give Me Back My Youth is going to be good. Hold on. You know what? Since this is my last question, hold on. I'll be right back. Okay, so here's the answer. The answer is quite likely won't be a problem, but get your oncologist to communicate with. I would get your oncologist and say, hey, I need you to connect you with my research team and either get me or actually don't get me. Send it to science at the Root Brands, and I'll get Christina connected on that, and then we can have our team connect with the doc and have chit chat.
Oh, okay. So should I quit the Give Me Back My Youth right now then?
No, I think it's fine.
Okay.
Shouldn't hurt, but I would just get the are you putting like drops of CleanSlate over that area too?
No, I didn't know if I was supposed to.
I would.
Like I can put it right in my ear, like, because that's the tumor is right behind the eardrum.
Hold on. I'm not treating cancer, but if I had that issue, I would do it. But I would send a message to science because I have a disclaimer that says this is for educational and entertainment purposes. So if I was doing that for entertainment purposes, I'd put it in my ear. But it's not my ear. And I would get your onco to get connected with our people so we can have a chit chat. Because here's one thing, I want that case study because I know what will happen. But yeah, there's a conversation that needs to take place. So say direct your oncologist and say, look, I need to connect you guys.
Oh,
if they question why, just say, hey, you know what? I have a former adjunct professor at Johns Hopkins in oncology that I use as a consultant, and she's a close friend of mine. I want to bring her on this conversation. because she trains
Mm.
oncologists.
Well, there we go. Thanks.
Yeah, and they'll go, I want to talk to her. So,
Awesome. Thank you, Clayton. I appreciate it.
and that is how we end
That's
our
it.
day.
Konnichiwa.
That's who used that.
I did, said the pig.
That's my line, but well played. So
Thanks.
everybody, happy Tuesday that feels like Monday. And it's a new month. We get to help new people. We're off to an amazing start. If you're able to come to Cyprus, a couple things. Because I know that there's going to be some craziness that happens the end of this month, beginning of October. It's going to be fireworks globally. It's going to be amazing. But if you're able to make it to Cyprus, I'm telling you, it will be an experience like no other. One, what we have lined up from an educational standpoint, a couple of speakers, Sasha Stone's coming. So if you like Sasha, you'll be able to hang out with me and Dr. Ram and Sasha and Ginger Keanu as much as you want. You'll be able to play poker with Henrik and I. We still got a few tickets for a few rooms left. But if things get really crazy and we get stuck in Cyprus, I'll tell you, I picked that as top 5 places that I want to be stuck right now because it's amazing. We can go hang out in the Mediterranean, eat fish and whatever. Oh, here's a fun thing. You know, they have the Mediterranean flu that they have that they know in like Cyprus and everything, Greece. They have the Mediterranean flu. It's a disease they consider. It's funny. I was working with our partners over there and he's like, hey, one of our friends has the Mediterranean flu. She got this. I'm like, oh, that's mercury toxicity. He's like, huh? No one knows how to treat it. I'm like, give her clean slate. She'll be fine. So we did that, went back over 30 days later. He's like, you know, she doesn't have pain anymore. I'm like, yeah, I know. I told you. It's fine. It's perfect. It's that simple. Yes, we're going to be doing a lot of recording and videoing in Cyprus, but we won't be recording what we're talking about there because a lot of it, because we're not in the EU, we're not in the United States, and it's only going to be for people in attendance. We're going to go over stuff that you really want to talk about. And that alone is reason to be in attendance, let alone playing poker, which is great. So hopefully this was informative and educational. Hopefully it was also entertaining and we learned something because I did. And we'll do this again next week. But go forth, share with your friends. And remember, even the people you don't like probably could use a little help because if they get more zero in, they'll probably be more tolerable. So we got to help the weak ones too. Who knew? All right. As a wise woman once said, konnichiwa, my friends.